Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, we'll be going up through the systems of the game that I made, and I'll be putting up timestamps for each of the systems, so you would have an easier way to traverse through them. And if some of these are pretty boring for you, you can actually skip them in a more concise manner. Anyways, without further ado, let's just hop into the first one, and that is the movement. I'll be seeing you in the code in a few seconds. Now, when it comes to movement, there is nothing much to be talked about. It's a basic Unity starter asset package third-person controller, which, just implements a player. This whole animation is from Miximo, and if we play it, he is going to move. He has a walking state, a running state, and a casting state, which all were, pretty basic. The casting state was something that I implemented myself and added to it, but we'll talk about that later on. He can run, he can jump, and there are some of the sounds, which is one of my modified codes. And yeah, that's about it. Let's go to the second one, which is the casting, and there's not much switching here, as it's all taped into the player. He can cast a spell. Actually sounded like, what was that guy's name? Not Gilderoy Lockhart, the first guy. Doesn't matter. Anyways, when I cast, the red ball actually represents that something is in the range. The blue ball would represent that something is out of the range, and of course, if you for some reason don't hear it, the casting sound is going to be played. And the ball is also in a 3D space, so stuff like this is always going to happen. Now, if you played the first game and the second game, you know that there is a, let's say, a crosshair that becomes yellow when you're in range and red when you're out of the range. And when you hit something that's castable, for instance, a Flipendo Cauldron, which we'll be heading through right now, it just, makes the crosshair have a shape of your desired spell. And we'll get to that right now. I'm just going to make a cut so you don't see the long walk to the cauldron. Okay, here we are. So when you cast on a cauldron, it actually detects that it's a Flipendo spell or whatever, and it throws a rocket to it. And the cauldron spills out beans. Now, this whole logic is implemented right in the cauldron. So if I go to it, let's just switch to this one so I don't accidentally cast something. There's an amount of beans to spawn, there's a wait time before it spawns the beans, so it just waits for the animation to finish. There's a rate on which the beans are spawned, so one bean each 0.25 seconds, and the disposition should represent the line on which the beans are spawned, since if we look at the cauldron right now, it's this line right here, and the beans are spawned around that line. The X refers to the width, and the Y refers to the height. The Z would refer to the depth, but I don't think that's needed, since the line should actually be 2D spaced and not 3D one. Okay, that's all about the cauldrons. If you hit the cauldron by mistake, this is my test also for something that's castable and non-castable. So for instance, if I aim at this one, and I hit something that's not castable, you see you actually hear the spell dot sound. Now there's a bug that I noticed. If I hit the cauldron that's rotated a little bit differently, now you don't see that, but this cauldron right here is rotated a little bit differently. It executes the animation properly, but the disposition line is kind of set up in a very, very weird way, which I didn't really think through. And something very, very funny like this tends to happen. But that's because I chose the wrong vector, as no, we're actually selecting the wrong one, as the line should be spawned always on a consistent part rather than the vector.up. Now this is the vector.up, the green one represents the upper part. Now they're all glued here because they have a certain animation to them, and you can't really move them when the game starts. So basically, rather than giving it a hard-coded line, which is, you know, this one right here, I would give it the vector.up and instantiate the line on the upper vector. That was accidental. And, you know, we have the collectibles, we have the beans, they rotate, and they make these 6 sounds. I actually done that intentionally since I need to enable the UI. I kind of coupled the UI with the beans, not something you should want to do in your game. Basically, the beans need to fire an event, and if there is a UI listener, the scoreboard for the beans should increase rather than when you collect the bean, it calls for something that's non-existent or disabled, which, you know, really doesn't make sense. But it's something that I'm going to refactor, as I was just focused on making the skeleton of the game as soon as possible. So you can hear the sounds from Harry Potter 1 and Harry Potter 2, respectively. And for my taste, the sound from Harry Potter 2 is way better than the sound from Harry Potter 1. If I could manage to reduce the volume on Harry Potter 1 sound, that would be cool, but for now, the Harry Potter 2 sound for Bean Collection is way more superior. And I'm thinking of just dropping the Harry Potter 1, but, you know, if you think that there is something else to be done, you know, leave a comment. I would gladly review that, but, you know, my own taste is the Harry Potter 2. So if you didn't notice, the beans actually increase the count on the UI. So you started, thank goodness. So you started with 3 beans, I think, and the more you collect, the more beans appear. Now that's been set up in the UI base, so if you look at the UI base and specifically the beans count, actually let's just revert to it, go to the beans count, and so you start with 3 beans, and the moment we enable all of them, you would have something like this. To me, this is pretty dope. Beans full is actually this. So this is how the beans full look like. You don't see it pretty much copied, except maybe for these 2 images, but that's about it. And that's all for the UI that I've set up. You have the pause menu. You heard that in the past video as well. Nothing too complex. So if I pause the game, the Diagon Alley music plays, and the UI looks very atrocious and ugly just because I've scaled it to 2000 with 1200 pixels, which is something that I shouldn't have done, but you know, I made that decision because it's most suitable for every single monitor down the line. It's basically an industry standard, at least I read it that way. So yeah, that's it for the video, guys. Thank you for watching. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I have a few more systems to showcase, but you know, the video is already getting way too long, so there's no reason for me to do it. I'll be seeing you in the next one, and goodbye.